Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. I have the privilege to introduce Blake Starbuck. He is a graduate of our Risk Management and Insurance program, and he is the Producer Development Manager at Bouchard Insurance, and that is a Marsh and McLennan, I hope I'm saying this correctly, agency. And he is going to be speaking with us today. And I think he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself. And then afterwards, he will give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to him. So go ahead, Blake.
Great. Thanks, Marissa. Certainly appreciate the intro, and thank you to Chelsea for coordinating this. So I'm excited. Thank you again for having me. If you want to turn on your video, that's great. Inside our organization, I also have to beg my producers to try to show their faces on Zoom. But I recognize that it's before noon, so some people are still kind of in transition to their work days, so that's totally fine. So I'm going to share a little bit about myself, just as much as makes sense, a little bit about our company and who we are and what we do, and then also just give my perspective on an internship program. So, at Bouchard Insurance, we've had a version of an internship program for about 8 years now. We started out with one person, a single intern, and over the years has grown pretty significantly. So this past summer, we plan to have an in-person internship, and of course that sort of fell by the wayside, but we were able to pull together a program that ended up being virtual. We ran that jointly with another region of MMA here in the state of Florida. And I think we ended up having around 26 total participants. So, we took the lemons that were dealt to us and made some good lemonade. I was talking with Chelsea and Marissa before we actually brought you all on the call. And it was a great experience. My hope certainly is that it will be in person this year. Because it just wasn't quite the same. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that through your coursework and interaction with friends and family, et cetera. It's just not the same, but obviously we need to be conscious of what's going on and make good decisions. So I'm going to share a tiny bit about me, really just as a cautionary tale for you all, maybe how not to do it or be a little bit more efficient at it if you can. I actually graduated from Florida State undergrad as well in 2004 with a degree in clothing, textiles, and merchandising. It's an extremely well-respected and nationally renowned program. But frankly, I aligned myself with it because I thought it was an efficient way to get out of school and really start making money, which in retrospect was not the best decision for me. But long story short, I tried a handful of different careers before ultimately landing in insurance in 2006 on the agency side as a producer. For those of you that don't know, a producer is essentially an insurance agent or an insurance salesperson on the agency side. Went on the insurance carrier side for a handful of years and ultimately landed here at Bouchard Insurance, at the time a privately held agency. And I've been here for going on 10 years now. So it's been a phenomenal ride. Figured out what I wanted to do, that I wanted to stay in the insurance industry. In around 2008, joined the Master's in Risk Management program in 2009, and then wrapped that up in 2011. I'll give that program a little plug here. I know Chelsea is an alum as well. Phenomenal program. I think one of the best bang for the buck out there. Certainly nothing against a traditional MBA program, but I think it's an industry that certainly is on the rise. More and more people are figuring out how much opportunity there is in that space. And I think certainly it gives you a little bit of a different angle, right? A different vantage point than a traditional MBA program. So anyway, that's my plug for the Master's in Risk Management program. So who is Bouchard/MMA? So Bouchard was founded in 1948 in Clearwater, Florida, as a one-man shop, Roger Bouchard. Over the course of decades, came to focus more on commercial insurance, the personal lines insurance, but still had that practice, specifically with a focus on workers' compensation insurance. And by the time 2008, 2009, and beyond came, we were the largest privately held agency in the state of Florida. I was fortunate enough to align myself with the agency on that timeline. Became a shareholder at Bouchard Insurance before we partnered almost 2 years ago to the date now with Marsh and McLennan Agency, which is part of Marsh and McLennan Companies. MMC is their ticker symbol. And it's been a fantastic relationship for me, for our producers, and really for all of our employees. So my job specifically as producer development manager is finding talent to enter into our sales training and development program, then running that program, and ultimately being sales manager to all of our new agents for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives with us. The insurance sales means a lot of things. What we focus on specifically is larger commercial groups selling property casualty products, as well as employee health and benefits to companies that spend anywhere from 100 grand a year to multiple millions of dollars a year. So it's less of a transactional sale and more of a little bit longer sales cycle, much more consultative approach, where we certainly still do our fair share of prospecting and cold calling, but the sale is much longer, many more interested parties, etc. That's who Bouchard is. That's who MMA is. That's who I am. We're going to get to a Q&A portion ultimately, so feel free to ask any questions about me, my background, or MMA. But now I'm going to hop to talking about internships. As I mentioned at the top, I love our internship program, and I like it for a handful of reasons. But as I was thinking about how I wanted to do this logically, I thought it made the most sense to give you two perspectives. My perspective as an employer running an internship program, and then also what perspective you all should take, assuming that you're considering an internship program, or if we happen to have anybody on the phone who might be considering running one by chance. So from the employer's perspective, and I'm going to speak about us and the way that we view it, and certainly other businesses have their own views on it. But I thought it made sense to break it into two further buckets, right? And there's some selfish motives to running the program, and then we have some very altruistic motives for running the program. I think the more selfish motive is that we're running this program. It's the only way that we hire new salespeople into our organization, and with that, just like any other sales job, I need to keep my pipeline full, right? So I'm always looking for extremely talented people who I think ultimately can do well in this very, very highly engaged, long sales cycle type of sale, but also be a great culture fit for Bouchard as well as Marsh and McLennan agency. So I want to keep that pipeline moving. And frankly, there's no better interview process for an employer than having somebody in your office interacting with all of your employees over the course of however long your internship is. We happen to run exclusively a summer internship that lasts about 2 months. And you get lots of, anybody can fake it during one interview, and then a second interview 2 weeks down the line, and then a third interview a week down the line. But when somebody is in your office 4 or 5 days a week times 8 weeks, you're going to see people for who they ultimately are down the line. So that's more of the selfish motives for myself running an internship program. But there definitely are altruistic motives as well. And I touched on this a little bit earlier at the top. Anybody that gets into insurance and decides this is me, this is what I want to focus on as a professional, I get it, tends to get a little bit nerdy and passionate about talking about how much opportunity there is over here. And unlike some other industries, which I think kind of like say, no, this is our thing, and everybody's really competitive for spots here, we're always trying to bring new people into the industry, right? Like we want to share how fantastic it is and all the opportunity that's here. And we happen to have a lot of insurance people, obviously, we're an insurance brokerage. But additionally, we have a lot of Florida State alums, and we have a lot of Florida State risk management alums and General College of Business alums. So, we'd love to foster that. We love to continue to foster our relationship with Florida State. And as it makes sense, occasionally foster relationships with other universities as well. Less frequently the one in Gainesville. We try to just continue up 75 and avoid that one completely. But we want to expose a ton of folks to our industry. Less than 50% of the people that come through our internship program end up becoming producers for us full time at Bouchard, and that's totally fine. And honestly, that's probably a pretty high hit ratio or conversion rate. But all we ask really from an engagement standpoint for anybody entering our program is to give us your full undivided commitment, engagement in the program. We don't go into it expecting for every single person to be a producer, let alone an employee at Bouchard Insurance. And so that engagement is what we're looking for. We are looking for sales potential in the majority of the cases, but right above that lives culture fit, because it doesn't matter if you can be the most successful producer in the world in our organization. If you bring negative personality, negative mindset, that's going to bring down the handful of people that you work with and limit their productivity, whatever revenue you can bring to our organization is absolutely not worth it, right? And so we carry that to our internship program as well. And I think it's important to note, and this probably parlays nicely into your perspective, right, as current interns, potential future interns. I've given far more letters of recommendations, done references for a ton of our former interns than I have actually hired people. And if somebody gives me everything they got for 2 months, I'm more than happy and frankly excited to talk to a prospective employer about how phenomenal this person was for me. That it just wasn't a fit for what we were looking for at the time. And that, by the way, that's typically a mutual decision, right? We sit down with our interns at the end of every single summer and say, hey, tell us what we did great. Tell us what we could have done better. Here's our feedback on how you performed. Do you think it's a fit? We'd love to have you as an employee. Maybe it's in sales. Maybe it's not in sales. But you gave us a lot, right, for the last 2 months. And so we're here, and we're here for you, whether that's as an employer or not. I'm going to pause for a second before I flip to, and Chelsea, I don't know if you wanted to hold all the questions till the end, but we got a relatively small amount of people. So if somebody has a question now, I'm good with that, or I can just jump into the intern's perspective.
You can go ahead, and then we'll collect questions at the end.
Perfect. I'm going to do water and then some coffee. I'll jump into it.
Yes, and if you are thinking of questions as Blake is presenting, please go ahead and enter them into the chat. Or if you're comfortable, you can unmute yourself when the questions portion arises and talk to Blake.
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, the bigger percentage of this that is you asking questions and not necessarily me talking, the better this is probably going to go for everybody. So the final thing I'm going to touch on is the intern's perspective, right? So I've been aligned with our internship program in my seventh summer with it, having some level of involvement. And so I've been able to see, I've been able to interact with other employers who are hiring interns. I've talked to our current interns who are interns somewhere else, and some of my interns that interned somewhere else the year after. And so I have some probably fairly strong but loosely held opinions on what you all should be looking for in a potential internship opportunity. The thing that I wrote down first, and I think is probably the most important, is it should have a heck of a lot of structure behind it. And then the sort of part B of that bigger piece is, my feeling is that company should not be expecting for you to significantly increase the productivity of their firm while you're there. My perspective is, I want you to completely understand who I am, who our organization is, what the PIP program is, what Bouchard is, what it feels like to be an employee of Bouchard, and then how we fit into the greater Marsh and McLennan agency. I want you to understand the insurance industry. We're on the retail side, so we're going out and meeting directly with business owners and business leaders. There's a wholesale side of our business. We interact with insurance companies all the time. We don't want to just talk about us. We want you to understand the complete picture. And so, I think if you're going to a company and they have some huge project for you to do, we do projects as well, right? So we get a little bit of productivity out of our interns, but the overarching theme is like, we want you to be steeped in who we are, what we're about, and it's all about educating you and less about productivity. But as you're interviewing with folks, I would say, like, hey, how structured is your program? Do you have any projects? Do you do presentations? How exposed will I become to senior leadership, management, executive leadership, whatever it looks like in that organization? What does a day in the life look like? What's a week in the life look like? Would it be okay if I reached out to some of your former interns to ask them about their experience? I would absolutely love that, right? If I'm trying to convince someone to join our internship program, I have a list of about 40 people that I'd be happy to share with them. I'd be happy to talk about our internship program. So you all are, as you know, very highly recruited folks. You should be very choosy about where you're choosing to grab your internships, because you might have one or two, right, opportunities to do it at most. And you deserve to be choosy, right? And you should make a good choice. And once you make that choice, it's on you to be fully engaged in it and grab everything that you can. But I would say that that's number one. Like, I don't recommend going to a firm that expects you to rapidly increase their productivity, unless that's the absolute best way to learn that industry and what they're about. From my view is, if we know each other, us as a company and you as an individual really well by the end of the internship, then it's been a total success in my eyes. I think somebody that has an upbeat, positive, and productive culture is critical. And I'm obviously massively biased, but I think that we definitely have that here. And I think, what I've talked a lot about is what profession you want to go into in this industry. But I think a bigger takeaway potentially is what type of firm you want to work for. And I don't mean are they finance, CRE, or whatever. I mean more what are they about, right? Like what is their why? Are there people happy, or can you walk into the office and immediately tell that there's a lot of people that aren't super happy about working here? And you might make the wrong choice, frankly. And I did that a lot of times, which is mostly my own poor decision making. But you pay attention, right? And you'll start to see some of those things. But that matters a lot, right? Like the money is out there, and if you guys continue to work hard, the money will ultimately come. But it's not worth being miserable in an organization. So pay attention to the culture, and even if you grab, an internship opportunity at what ends up not being the right company for you, there's a tremendous amount of information to be learned there as well. So even if you're not extremely excited about it, when you actually show up on day 1 or 2 or recognizing on day 10, my advice would be, you're there, go ahead and absorb everything that you can from it. And if you need some direction, advice, counsel on how to approach what's a different situation that you thought you signed up for, I would lean on your faculty and the staff and the College of Business to say, hey, this isn't what I was expecting. They're treating me fine, but how can I milk every ounce of positivity and benefit out of this experience, even though it's not exactly what I thought it would be. I think that's about it. Again, it's less about, from my perspective at least, trying to be PC, it's less about finding, the pipeline is important to us, but it's more so about teaching people about our industry, who we are, because honestly, I've hired more people as a result of folks who were my interns that had really great friends that are probably a better fit for sales or our agency, saying like, I didn't work out at Bouchard MMA because I decided insurance was horrific to me and I wanted to go in commercial real estate, or I decided I wanted to work on the wholesale side because I got exposed to that. But I think you would be an awesome fit. It's a great company to work for, and I think you have the personality to be a great salesperson. And so that's sort of my overarching feelings on internships. That was probably a little bit rambly in spots. So if it was, I apologize for that. But I'm glad. It looks like 39 of our 60 minutes together will be mostly Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, fire away. It doesn't have to do with internships. It can be about my professional experience, some of the mistakes that I've made. There's a lot of those. How I ended up here, more about Bouchard, more about MMA, whatever works for you. Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things is probably being a little bit too casual about the opportunity. It's a challenge, especially for us, because we're I think the best way to say this since it's being recorded. We're an organization that likes to have fun, and occasionally we probably teeter on the line of like HR people, especially at a publicly traded level, cringing a little bit. But as much fun as we like to have, it's an organization that also is pretty professional, especially when we get in front of prospects and clients, and hopefully, talking to you all. So people that come in and maybe got a certain vibe about who we are, but then show up at the actual workplace and treat it, the opportunity and or their time with us a little bit casually, is probably where things start to fall off. We're a huge organization on feedback and accountability. And so even, as an internship, you might not think that I, as a leader, would come to you after your first week as an intern and say like, hey, just want you to understand, I recognize you haven't worked in an office environment before, but there's certain standards, right? And we compose ourselves in a certain way, carry ourselves in a certain way. And there's certain things that we don't say, don't do, and certain things we do and say in an office, and you need to know what that is. I didn't put that in my preamble there. Another huge part of an internship is just understanding what life is like in an office environment, right? Because myself included at one point in time, I had no frame of reference for that. And that's not just an intern thing. I hire plenty of folks straight out of undergrad that I have to have very similar conversations with. So I would say, don't treat the opportunity casually. Again, even if you come in and recognize that this is not the company for me, I don't want to be an insurance broker, that's totally fine. But a lot of people know a lot of other people, and probably hear this ad nauseum from everybody that speaks to you, but network matters, right? And people know people, and it's a real big, small state. So just keep that in mind. But like I said, if somebody gives me everything they got for 2 months, I'll bend over backwards to help them out however I can, knowing that that's more than likely going to be something outside of our organization. Yeah, good question. So it's, if you go to www.bouchardinsurance.com, I think we actually just recently updated that. So now we redirect to Marsh and McLennan agencies page. We're kind of 2 years into our 3-year transition phase. And you click on careers, there should be a link to an internship opportunity in Clearwater or Tampa Bay. If there's not, feel free to email me directly. So my email address is blake.starbuck@marshmma.com. And if it's not out there, or if you just want to send me an email, totally fine with that too. I'll definitely get you pointed in the right direction. If you do send me an email, if there is no link to apply for the internship directly, please go ahead and include your resume, and I'll get that to our HR team. Oh boy. I could answer that a couple ways. I would say picking a path, right? I'm always floored, and Kathleen knows this because I talk about it every time I'm up there, and how well prepared the vast majority of the College of Business students are, and having a clear vision on where they want to go. I would say the biggest hurdle for me was finding out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And unfortunately, I didn't figure that out until 4 or 5 years after I got out of undergrad. Again, mostly because of a series of unfortunate decisions that I made, but got me to where I am today, which is fine. That was probably the biggest hurdle, is saying like, okay, insurance is my thing, right? And I'm nearing an adult. I'm getting into a serious relationship. I'm thinking about marriage. Ultimately, marriage leads into dogs and kids and houses and mortgages and cars. So if I make this decision now, this is it, right? And so I would say that was a fairly significant personal hurdle for me, was just getting over knowing that, like, hey, whatever road I take now, I'm probably going to ride this road until 60, right? At a minimum, 60, 65, somewhere in there. So that was probably the biggest challenge for me, was internally making that decision. Good question. So, and I touched on this, and I'm fortunate to not come across it very often. We have a really strong culture, and one of our core values, we only have 4 core values, and one of them is be happy. And that sounds really silly, like, Google Office with ping pong tables and slides or something. That's not who we are. But ultimately, the insurance industry historically hasn't had the best reputation for having, vibrant, young, happy people bouncing around. And that's simply not the case anymore. And a workplace doesn't have to be that way. So, we hire really, really talented, high quality people who are happy to be doing their job. And frankly, we've hired some extremely talented, high caliber people that crush doing the job, that just bring other people down. And those aren't people we want in the organization, right? And those aren't, we don't say, hey, you're acting this way, you're out. Obviously, we have counseling processes, and we're big on feedback and accountability, and that's part of it, right? specifically for our producers, when they're unvalidated, I give them a culture score, right? And so I have your objective measurements over here. I know how many calls you've made. I know how many meetings you've set. I know how many opportunities you've created. I know how much revenue you've closed. But I'm also going to tell you the way that you're being viewed by the organization. I know what makes a successful producer, and you're crushing it or you're falling short in one of these 5 areas. But if I boil it down to just an employee level, somebody that is willing to work hard and happy to be there, and a good person to be working next to in a cubicle, whenever we can do that again, is it, right? And so somebody that just, that's really the one thing that will get you out of the organization quickly, or where we deem somebody not a fit, is if we think somebody's going to come into the organization and limit the productivity and happiness of somebody else. That's really it. We're an extremely upbeat, positive, diverse group of people. But anybody that threatens that usually is going to be find themselves on the out. So I did one internship, and that internship was with Target Stores of Jacksonville. I was a clothing, textiles, and merchandising major at the time. And I actually had a phenomenal professor, Mr. Mack, who was part of the College of Human Sciences at the time, specifically the merchandising program. And he was pretty brutal at putting us through mock interviews and doing them at torturous times in the morning for a college student, like 7:38, need you here shaved and in a suit, and I'm going to pepper you with really, really challenging questions. I would say that's the only reason I got an internship, is because of Mr. Mack and punishing me at 7:30 in the morning. So I would say that probably was it, and Mr. Mack specifically, I think took an interest in me as one of the relatively few gents in the merchandising program. Didn't want me to disgrace it. And so, saw some areas of opportunity and probably more so improvement than I needed, and spent a lot of time getting me more well prepared to interview well for that internship experience. But it definitely was just somebody saying like, hey, you got some shortcomings, here they are, and I'm going to help you close those. But for me, a lot of that was honing my interview skills. It wasn't easy, right? So we have an extremely structured internship program. If somebody is not from the Tampa Bay area, our internship lives in Tampa Bay. If somebody's not from the Tampa Bay area, we provide housing. So we'll find a rental house, gentlemen over here, ladies over here, separated, and involve a lot of people in our organization. It's Monday through Thursday, 7.5 hours a day. You do this on this timeline. Here's your presentation. Here's your project. And then, in Kathy, you might remember this better than me, mid-April of last year, everybody just said, time out, in-person internships are not happening. And so we had a decision to make, and every employer that had an internship program had a decision to make, to say, hey, do I cancel this completely and just not deal with it, which a good amount of organizations did, or do I try to take, the current people that we have, maybe expand it to some people that were displaced from their internship programs, and try to make the best out of it. So again, we joined forces with MMA Florida, who's our sister region in the state of Florida under the MMA flag, banner, so to speak, and said, hey, you all run an internship program, we do too. This is going to be hard, right? We can't just take what we've had in person and turn it into a virtual thing. That's not going to go well. So we need to really consider how to make this thing click. And we have a handful of people dedicated to it on our side, and you guys do too. So let's put our brains together and try to make something great. And I think we made something pretty good, given the circumstances and the resources that we had at our disposal. So if God forbid, if we have to do a completely virtual internship again this summer, we at least have a playbook, right? I think we'll probably tweak a couple of things to try to make it a little bit better. But we got a playbook, right? Now, what if COVID is still kind of a thing, but people are more open and the office is partly open? I don't know. we're still dealing with that ourselves as an employer. MMC is a multinational company. So, our offices overseas are doing their own thing. Obviously, our offices in San Francisco and New York are doing different things than we are in Florida, for better or for worse. I don't know. But what I do know is that our organization has a tendency to probably be overly cautious, which is good because we're managers of risk at the end of the day. So I don't know exactly what it will look like. My hope is that it's, puppy dogs and ice cream and nobody has any fear of COVID and we just go back to our normal thing that we did before. And if it can be in person, we still just need to take precautions. What we have right now is plenty of real estate and floor space for people to be working, and most of our people are still working from home. So I think that we can accomplish a lot, given that we have this real estate that's sitting unused to keep people distanced, but also still get some of that, in-person engagement that we desperately miss.
Great.
The Tallahassee piece.
Yes.
Our internship is in person. So if it becomes virtual, and anybody we've hired for our internship in person becomes a virtual intern, I will tell you that MMA nationally, so outside of just the Bouchard region, runs a much more condensed version of an externship program. Their legal and HR teams prefer to call it an externship because it's virtual. And that's a good exposure to the industry, who we are, what we're about, but the time commitment is much smaller. And I think we open that up to anybody. Like, there was no interview process. So even if we are still, have some constraints wrapped around COVID when summertime rolls around, but you want to understand the industry, what's the retail side of the business look like, who's MMC, who's MMA. I think we probably will do something very, very similar. And last summer we opened our doors to anybody that was interested. So I imagine we would do that again. Oh boy. That's a bigger question than you might realize, because there's a lot of different types of insurance to be sold. And even in our space, let's remove ourselves from MMA, MMC. When we were privately held Bouchard, we had personal lines, right? So that's like my homeowner's insurance, my auto insurance, my personal umbrella. We had private client, right? Which is people that are far wealthier and famous than I am, that have houses in multiple states, countries, all over the place, and boats and cars and toys that I don't have. And they have like more of a dedicated, almost like a commercial agent. Then we have small business, property and casualty, and small business benefits. And then we have large commercial, which is the space that I work in, the producer and training program lives in. And I think there's and then there's, obviously independent life insurance agents and Medicare supplement agents, all kinds of different things. So I think the skill set varies dramatically depending upon what type of sale you're approaching, right? Even between our large commercial property and casualty salespeople and our SBU or select business salespeople, it's a different type of sale. The people want to purchase differently. Our carriers do it differently. They underwrite it differently. But what I can tell you is, if you want to be an insurance salesperson, regardless of what you're hoping to sell, you better like talking to people. You better like, or find a way to be comfortable with, I should say, cold calling, and doing a heck of a lot of cold and potentially lukewarm outreach, especially for the first 2 to 3 years of your life as an insurance agent, because that's what it takes. Now, the beauty of sales in our industry is residual income. So you're building a book of business. As long as you do a decent job for those folks and continue to perform, you continue to get paid, right? So the idea is that you build this book of business. Hopefully you retain 90 to 95% of it year over year and grow it a little bit. So you start every year knowing, okay, I have $1 million book of business. I'm going to make $250,000 this year if I don't really screw it up. And if I write $100,000 this year, I'm going to tack another $25,000 on top of that $250,000 next year. My book will be $1.1 million. That's great. But that's the beauty of it. There's a ton of sales jobs where you can start out of the gate and crush it, right? More transactional sale. I'm putting in the activity. I'm getting paid. The first year you make 75, 80 grand, and your buddy who's in a training program and an insurance broker, is making $45,000, $50,000 a year and hasn't even gone into active production yet, or has been in production for a year and hasn't closed his first deal. Revisit that 10 years down the line and see what it looks like, right? You don't start at zero every single year in this type of sale, which is ultimately what I think people are attracted to. It also makes your life, to some degree, as an agent, a little bit easier once you're 5-10 years in. If you can make it past that initial hump, which is hard, it's hard. But if you can do it, the residual income is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. And the amount of cold calling goes from this at the beginning to over time, and it shrinks pretty significantly too. I'm just known for being great at what I do. My clients have friends who are also business owners and business leaders, and they say, hey, you got to call Blake. He's the guy, or call anybody at MMA. They're extremely good at what they do. That's it. I can't highlight a single thing except for being willing to have high activity and really liking to talk to people and have a fairly thick skin. Massively realistic. I have, maybe I shouldn't say this on a recorded Zoom, but like, I don't care what you studied. If somebody has the ability to, the first check mark for me is, right, can they be a culture fit? Okay, that's done. Set it aside. Do they have potential to be a successful salesperson in our program, whether that's large commercial PIT program, or it's in SBU, or it's in private client, whatever. I don't care. As long as you're going to be a great employee to our firm, you're going to treat other people well, people are going to be happy to have you part of the team, you're going to bust your hump. That's all it takes. I don't care. I studied clothing, textiles, and merchandising, and now I'm a sales manager at an insurance broker. It really takes all kinds and has less to do with your course of study. If you have a degree in RMI, that's fantastic, because you don't have to take licensing exams, which is an awesome benefit. And you have a little bit of a leg up, right? So there's times where, at least in our program, your peers are going to be studying to take those exams and you're not. But outside of that, the people that want to work hard come to parity with the RMI students within 2 or 3 months. So it's certainly not a prerequisite that you study insurance. That's fantastic, as all the programs in Florida State are. I would say that it is important, but less so in content and more so in structure. So people come into interviews really concerned as an undergraduate student about the lack of bulk on their resume. I know that you're 19 years old and that you're in high school 2 years ago. It's fine, right? Like, you worked at Publix, I worked at Publix. It's fine. So don't be concerned about like putting a overly positive spin or really beefing up your time as a bag person at Publix. We know where you're at, right, in your progression, but be a little bit more thoughtful about the structure of it, making sure that it looks clean and neat, tidy. You got to lean on a friend who's a little bit better at the grammar and punctuation, spelling game than you are, then ask them to do that, or a staff member. I know that the Career Center has resources for that. And this may sound really petty, but that makes a big difference. If somebody has a ton of errors on their resume, it does. I try the best that I can to not read into it too much, but it matters, right? Outside of that, I would just say, like, look, if you're still an undergrad, you still have time and a tremendous opportunity to get more engaged, whether that's college of business, or if you play IM sports, or your fraternity or sorority, whatever. And there's some really good stories that can be told to a potential employer as an intern or full-time by being engaged. I was not very engaged in much in undergrad, so I didn't have any good stories to tell. But I'm always impressed by people who are maximizing their time in undergrad. That doesn't have to be professional, right? I mean, you could just be involved in your fraternity or sorority or the intramural, the club swim team, whatever it is. If you can show me that you're active, you're always trying to make yourself better, experience new things, that's all I care about. Just make sure your format is clean. You don't want somebody to take you, who might be a really well-qualified individual, see that you misspelled 10 things, you put periods on half of them, your alignment is off, and like, that's the thing. That could be, the straw that breaks the camel back. Just don't let that happen to you. But like GPAs, of course, I have a story about how terrible my GPA is, but like, I'm not an investment bank. You don't have to have a 3.8 GPA. So I wouldn't worry too much about that for me. Yeah, I could argue there's a lot of those, maybe in my current role. Um, you know, I think once you establish a foundation of where you're trying to go, um, you'd be silly to not take something that's going to push you outside of your comfort zone a little bit. Um, I started in this industry as a producer in 2006, and the agency I worked for didn't have a tremendous amount of structure wrapped around it. So I was like flapping in the breeze, another poor decision on my part. But then I said, all right, this is where I am. I'm not becoming a successful producer. What do I need to do? Maybe I can understand the industry better by being an underwriter and going to the carrier side. So I made that decision and I ended up doing it. Was I qualified out of the gate to be an underwriter? No, absolutely not. But did I work hard at it, commit myself to getting better at it, make some mistakes, potentially cost that company tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of my mistakes? Probably. But ultimately, like, you can't get better without making mistakes. And I think Richard Branson or somebody, whatever, gets posted on LinkedIn over and over again, said like, hey, if you get offered a job that you don't think you're qualified for, take it and figure it out on the fly. I'm definitely a believer in that. Obviously within some constraints, but I would say go for it, right? There's something called imposter syndrome where maybe you feel like you're not qualified to be in the position you're in now, or for somebody to recognize you as having the potential to be in an elevated role. But very often you are, right? You're already there. So, if somebody identifies you and thinks that you have the potential, they might believe in you more than you do yourself at that moment in time. So I would say go for it. One thing I will say is be very structured about it, right? The job I'm in now didn't exist 6 years ago. I saw a need for it, put together a business plan / job description, and I went and presented it to our CEO and said, hey, I think that there's a need here that's not being filled. This is how I think that it could fill, and I want to be that person, by the way. And for better or for worse, he decided to do it. But I think having a plan out of the gate, sharing that plan with your superiors, but also recognizing your shortcomings, right? And saying like, hey, I always ask this in interviews. You're telling me all the things that you possess today and the qualities and characteristics that are going to make you a great producer. In your gut, I guarantee you there's at least one thing that's in the back of your head going like, man, you're really going to have to overcome this in order to be successful. What is that thing, right? And so I think being honest about that with whoever you're going to be reporting to is important. Say like, hey, this is going to be my challenge. I want you to A, hold me accountable, but also B, assuming you're better at it, help me get better in this space. Let me know how I'm doing and keep me in check. So I would say take any opportunity you get to do something scary and put yourself out there. But just be really structured and make sure you put the gas pedal to the floor. Yeah. First of all, good for you for having two, well-defined paths that you could go down. I would say get as much exposure as you can, both to the industry as well as the organizations that you're talking to. And that might be a tell, right? If you reach out to one of these organizations or people in this industry and they're very close to the idea of letting you interact with their current employees, past interns, current interns, maybe that should be a red flag for you. But I would say, if you like the idea of all of them professionally and you think it's going to fulfill you professionally, make the decision on culture. Because I'm somebody that's left companies for money, a lot more money, and hated it. And I have friends who have left this organization and went to other companies for a significant amount more money and absolutely hated it, and wish they could go back for less money. So I would say, make a logical decision like, hey, I feel much more excited about commercial real estate than I do about finance. That's awesome. Then you should probably go towards real estate. But if it's down to like two companies, make the decision on people and try to say, hey, can I speak to some of your executive team? Can I speak to some of your senior leadership team? Can I talk to the guy in the mailroom? Can I talk to some of your current interns? Can I talk to some of your former interns? You'll get a sense for who that company is because you can't hide your warts if you talk to 10 different people. And even if you end up in an industry that ain't for you, if it's a great company, you're still going to get a ton of great experience. You'll be happy coming to work every day. And then they'll probably be understanding if you say, hey, I picked the wrong industry, but I love you guys. And they might say, hey, we'll write a letter of recommendation for you while you were here. You were fantastic. So I would say if it's coming down to two companies, make culture and the people your decider. If it's two different industries, to me, that's more of a gut. Maybe you need to try to get in front of 3 or 4 companies in those industries to better vet it out. And again, I know the faculty and staff can help you make those connections if you need to. And if it's in the insurance industry, I'm happy to do that for you. I was at a point in my career at one point in time where I reached out to Dr. Dunn, who was on staff at one point in time, and said, I ain't happy. And I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I'm becoming an adult now at 30. I want to get exposed to wholesale. I want to get exposed to retail. I want to get exposed to reinsurance and captives, all this stuff. And he said, all right, boom, 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 boom. Here's 5 people. Now it's your job to reach out to them. Maybe I'll send an email introducing you, but after that, it's on you. And that was a great experience for me. It forced me to get out of my comfort zone. And I also got to understand some parts of the industry that I didn't really understand all that well before. It's going to be a crazy, easy answer, but just do it more. In interviews, I get asked all the time, what can I do to make myself a better professional or to be where I want to be once I graduate and go? Put yourself in whatever situations make you feel awkward professionally. There's not so much anymore. I always have to have the COVID asterisk. There used to be, right, happy hours and mixers and socials and whatever. And you had to put yourself out there. Right? You had to go up to somebody who just spoke to your class for 10 or 15 minutes and say, hey, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Blake. You did a great job speaking today. That's terrifying, right? It was terrifying for me. That's why I never did it. But I can tell you that I'm more impressed by the student who comes up to me and fumbles over their words but introduces themselves to me than somebody who is the belle of the ball talking to everybody else and clearly is in a great social standing on campus that doesn't come up and speak to me. Because what I care about is professional life, not your social life, in Tallahassee. So I would say put yourself out there. And I'm probably putting undue burden on the faculty and staff of the College of Business right now. But opportunities are out there, right? There's mentor programs. I know for a fact those are out there. I know the faculty and staff have significant networks where you just want somebody to bounce ideas off of or do a mock interview with you. You can do it. But absolutely nothing is going to replace practicing. I'm actually going through a situation right now with one of my newer producers. He's 22, just went into active production, went through 6 months of training. He's been a producer for a handful of months. He's really struggling with cold calling. And I said, there's one way to get better, and that's making more cold calls. We're virtual. I can't listen into your cold calls right now. So if you're comfortable with it, you're going to be putting yourself out there, record it. Record a bunch of your cold calls and then send them to me, and we'll go through them together and critique yourself. It's extremely painful. When I watch this back, because it's being recorded, I'm going to cringe multiple times probably because it's weird, right? It's awkward to hear yourself, extremely awkward. But if you actually want to get better at doing it, practice with roommates, with friends, with family, even better with professionals in the industry you might want to work with. But practice, record yourself, and then watch it back. And honestly, that's probably the most painful, but one of the most beneficial things that you can do. Yeah, I do. And mentorship is huge for our organization in general. I'm kind of putting everything in the context or in terms of us, but we've run this producer training program for 16 years now, and we have 60 large commercial producers. We've been running it long enough that 55 of our 60 came through this same exact program, right? So we have a really, really strong pay it forward culture. If anything were ever to happen to that, the training is not the thing, right? We're not good because we have better training than anybody else. We're good because we've created this sales culture where the next generation helps the last generation, and that just continues to perpetuate, right? So mentorship is absolutely huge. It's been huge for me. my mentor is inside of our organization, but is not my direct boss. And it's a different relationship. Finding a mentor, in our world, I'm always trying to have our producers find centers of influence, right? And a lot of those centers of influence are people that are relatively prominent in the community, with the end game being they're connected to a lot of people. I can get connected to a lot of people. I can get meetings and create opportunities and close new revenue. But there's also a different kind of center of influence, and that's somebody that has been where you want to be, and is more of a mentor type COI. So if you want to get really involved in the community, and the CEO of Metropolitan Ministries in Tampa is out there, reach out to him and say, hey, I'm an up and coming professional. I admire what you've achieved professionally and personally, and I want to be more engaged in the community. We grab coffee for 20 or 30 minutes and talk through it. And sometimes that'll be a one-time deal, right? This person it's almost like an employer. This might not be romance, or it might not be a fit for us, but it might be. And it might be somebody that you latch onto, and this is something that you do. And there's no reciprocity expected, right? It's just somebody that has achieved a lot that is willing to invest in you. And so I would say start now, right? Look for people who could be mentors for you, whether they're inside of your industry or not. There is that formal program that Marissa mentioned. But I certainly think if you can be proactive and almost treat it like prospecting and reach out to a handful of different people of influence, you're going to be more successful, because we've tried to manufacture mentorship relationships before, and we bat about 100, right? It's not great. 100 out of 1,000, by the way. It's not good. So organic mentorship is by far the most effective, because the mentor is excited to help the mentee, and the dynamic just works. So, but that has to happen. I feel like I'm talking to a producer about cold calling. You got to make a lot of outreaches and talk to a lot of people and kiss a lot of frogs to find the mentor or mentors that are going to be right for you, but absolutely critical. And establishing them starting now is going to put you in a phenomenal place once you're actually in the working world. And it doesn't have to be one, right? You can have many that you bounce ideas off, and one you go to for certain things, and one you go to for other things. So critically important, absolutely start it now. And LinkedIn is a powerful tool. A lot of people that are in those positions, just like the happy hours, the mixers, I think a lot of people have this conception in their mind that everybody must pepper him or her executive leader with requests to do whatever. If you're a college student and you send them a message saying I admire the heck out of you, and I want to be close to where you're at one day, can I pick your brain for 10 minutes? I think you'll be floored at the uptake rate on that. Not everybody, right? Some people are jerks or just don't read their LinkedIn, and that's fine. But you got to make a handful of outreaches, and trust me, you'll start to make some connections with people. Oh, I only have 3 minutes left. I can't do it. I can't do it. That's tough. I would say buckle down. Yeah, I've made a lot of fun of myself, but I really am always impressed when I meet with the vast majority of students, especially in Tallahassee, not so much Gainesville, that how well put together they are and how well thought they are. You're probably going to be wrong 50% of the time on what you think your path is, but that's fine. You pick something. So I probably would tell myself, look, there's going to be a point in time where you care about this, and you're going to have a family, right, to support, and you're going to have a house, and you're going to have cars, and your kid's going to want to play baseball. And those things take money, right? And if those things you think are goals for you long term, then buckle down now, right? I got through financial accounting by the skin of my teeth, and in my job today, I'm I would really love to take accounting courses. Here I am at 38, wishing I could take accounting courses. When at 20, I was I'm going to take it during summer. I think the professors are a little bit more relaxed during summertime, and whatever. So I would just tell myself to focus and be okay with being wrong, because you're going to be wrong a lot in your life. But that's when you make new discoveries and grow, right, as a person and as a professional, is when you try some things, make some mistakes, learn from it, and move on. But I would say just picking a path and running hard at it, and then being honest with myself if I ultimately decide it's the wrong path.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I have enjoyed this, and I know our students have as well. So lots of great advice, and we look forward to having you hopefully soon on campus
Yeah, same.
as well. So we will be back in touch, I'm sure. And students, thank you for joining in as well. And as Blake said, feel free to reach out to him or us with any additional questions. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Make
Thank
it a great week.
you. Thank you so much, Blake.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Great job.